people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap of the Day of Reckoning card, which was a very big card that left us with a lot to reflect upon. So in this video, we're going to focus on three fights. Three fights primarily, three of the more talked about fights. The Daniel Dubois versus Jarrell Miller.
And I will discuss the other fights in a separate video.
This fight definitely lived up to my expectations. It definitely delivered. It was a mid-range to inside phone booth fight for most of the fight. While I was right to assume that Daniel Dubois was the more explosive puncher of the two, I was wrong to assume that he would fade down the stretch, that he would give out and give in and capitulate as the fight progressed. I went with Jarrell Miller to win the fight, and to my surprise, Daniel Dubois went to the well.
Should be proud of himself.
Fight starts off, and Jarrell Miller is doing everything that you expect him to do, coming forward and catching shots on the arms and on the gloves to close the distance and apply pressure on the other man as Daniel Dubois is beating those feet, moving around, boxing around Jarrell Miller, circling him and getting punches off. Jarrell Miller didn't do a whole lot in those first 1 or 2 rounds. He didn't start opening up until the third round, I'd say.
When it really turned into a fight.
The aesthetic of the match was not a hard one to understand. Most of the fight was fought mid-range to inside, seemingly on Jarrell Miller's terms, but Daniel Dubois was beating those feet to create space, and when he couldn't do that, he was pushing off of Jarrell Miller to create space and get punches off. The noticeable difference between the two, Daniel Dubois' punches seemed a bit more explosive, a bit more heavy, with more snap on them, whereas Jarrell Miller, given his size, that he's about 6'4", 333 pounds, he doesn't have the same range of motion as Daniel Dubois, so he can't drive his punches.
They don't have snap on them.
They don't have the same snap on them as Daniel Dubois' punches. They're not as damaging as Daniel Dubois' punches. The younger man of the two, who seemingly found his second wind in the second half of the fight.
As Jarrell Miller grew winded in the tail end of it.
Seems like cardio, at least in part, led to Daniel Dubois' victory, having better cardio and better energy reserves than Jarrell Miller, who had a lot to say in the buildup of the fight, though when push came to shove, he wasn't the better man.
I thought the pressure of a 6'4", 333-pound Jarrell Miller would have been enough to make Daniel give out and give in, and he didn't.
It was very much a gunfight, and young Daniel brought the bigger guns to the gun show. Not a painfully hard fight to understand or dissect. Daniel was just better on the move, better in the pocket.
And the bigger puncher of the two. Both guys put on a show, though I will admit that for all of Jarrell Miller's pre-fight build-up, for all of his talk,
I expected more, and I expected better, because here you have a fighter in Daniel Dubois who has a reputation for capitulating under pressure, coming right off of a knockout loss. They're basically serving him up to you on a platter. This was a golden opportunity for the disgraced Jarrell Miller, who tested positive for banned substances not once, but twice, on 2 separate occasions with 2 different promotional outfits. So the fact that he found himself boxing on a show this size,
that he was fortunate enough to get this opportunity,
I thought that he would have made more of it. It certainly seemed that way in the build-up, as he spent a lot of time trash-talking Daniel Dubois and trash-talking Anthony Joshua, drawing attention to himself. He's very good at doing that, though when push came to shove and it's time to throw hands, it's time to fight, it was Daniel that was the better man. Immediately after the fight, Jarrell Miller took to his social media to reflect on his loss, saying, "I didn't quit like no bitch. Inactivity was the killer tonight," and I don't know what inactivity he's referring to. He boxed earlier this year. He boxed back in March against Lucas Brown.
He boxed 2 times last year, and he was in action in March earlier this year. So it's not like Jarrell Miller was inactive. Put simply, it's just that Daniel was better. Better on the inside, better on the fly.
Better all around. And while I'm sure that there are some who are relishing the opportunity to see Jarrell Miller get his comeuppance, in a manner of speaking, I don't think this is the last we'll see of Jarrell Miller. He still is a serviceable fighter. They can still make fights for him in that region of the world so long as he is willing to take them.
I wouldn't mind seeing Jarrell Miller versus Dillian White or Jarrell Miller versus Joe Joyce.
They can still find use for him. As far as Daniel and what might be next for Daniel, well, I wouldn't mind seeing Daniel Dubois versus Agit Kabayel at some point next year. Agit Kabayel, who upset the apple cart for Russian strongman Arslanbek Makhmudov and completely deconstructed that fighter. Daniel is back in the winner's bracket, in a big way.
Beating the hell out of Jarrell Miller in the 10th and final round with just seconds left.
It just beat him. He forced the referee stoppage. Congratulations to young Daniel for getting himself back in the winner's bracket. We then come to the co-main event of that same card, the battle of the former champions, former WBC champion Deontay Wilder versus former WBO champion Joseph Parker.
I gave Wilder the benefit of the doubt.
That even if he gets off to a rocky start, and even if he's down on the cards for most of the match, eventually he'll find his groove and find his right hand, knowing that I'm not a big fan of Deontay Wilder, not a big believer in his boxing or his power.
I think he's a hype job. Understanding that,
that I've always thought he was a hype job, I figured maybe I write this guy off too easily, and maybe he would find the big right hand at some point in the Parker fight. And that never happened. Now, most of what we saw from Deontay in this fight is what we usually see.
It's not uncommon for Deontay to get off to a rocky start, to beat down on the cards, circling away from the opponent, trying to set up the big right hand, because Wilder never throws very many punches in a round.
He's never been that prolific a puncher, likely because he never had the gas tank for it, the cardio.
For how many years did we hear that this guy doesn't do nothing for his cardio? He doesn't skip rope, he doesn't do road work.
In any event, we saw Joseph Parker, the shortest, stumpier fighter of the two, sticking to the game plan, which was to stalk Deontay Wilder and force him back.
Put him under pressure.
Each round almost identical to the last, as Joseph Parker would back Deontay Wilder into those ropes, at which point Wilder's moving lateral, trying to keep distance between himself and Joseph to try and set up the big right hand, but he just couldn't get it out.
Couldn't pull the trigger.
Couldn't land the big right hand as Joseph Parker would advance, step into his punches, and either fluster Deontay Wilder mid-range to inside or end up in a clinch.
Wilder's never been any good mid-range to inside.
Joseph Parker seemed to be the busier fighter of the two. Consistently over the course of 12 rounds, it was Joseph Parker pushing the pace, pressing the issue, backing the other man off, letting punches go, landing punches.
Compared to Wilder,
Deontay only landed 19 of 207 punches thrown versus Joseph Parker. Just 19.
What's up, baby? Hey, man, we came up short tonight. You know, I don't know what happened, to be honest. You know, my timing was off, and I didn't throw my punches. I didn't let my hands go like I supposed to. Sometimes we get like that, you know what I mean? But, you know, you live to see another fight. You live to see another moment. That's all that matters. Still full of happiness. I'm still full of joy. I'm still full of smiles. Sorry if I let anyone down, you know, but we'll be back, though. That's the good thing about it, you know. And, man, I can't wait to get on this PJ to go back to my babies. I'm going to see her. Today is one of my daughter's birthday. Daddy, love you so much, baby. I'll be home soon, though. But I thank you so much for the love and support that I've got in Riyadh and all my families, all my fans around the world. I thank you. I appreciate you so much. This is not the end. And we'll be back. Love, peace, God bless.
Wilder immediately after the fight admitted that he didn't let his hands go and his timing was off. The year of inactivity is likely the culprit, that after the Robert Helenius fight, they didn't hurry up and schedule another fight right away, and you could argue that while they were trying to fight Andy Ruiz, but as soon as that fell apart, they should have looked to fight someone else, anyone else, because inactivity for a 38-year-old fighter,
it's a killer.
Deontay Wilder capped off last year, knocking out Robert Helenius, whereas Joseph Parker, comparatively, he capped off last year being knocked out by Joe Joyce. But he didn't take a bunch of time off. He hurried up and scheduled a fight early this year as soon as he could, and this was his fourth fight this year. You could argue that the first 2 or 3 fights that he had this year were little more than maintenance fights, keep busy fights, but in the end, they were beneficial because ring rust doesn't help anybody, it doesn't help anything, let alone a 38-year-old fighter. So if Deontay Wilder's inactivity is what costed him the fight yesterday, he has no one to blame but himself because he had ample time the entirety of this year to schedule a maintenance fight.
If he really wanted one.
Seems to me that Deontay, like a lot of PBC fighters, would have been happy to let this year come and go without having a fight, waiting for something bigger to come along, and when something did, he wasn't ready for it. The Saudis offered him money that he couldn't turn down, made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. So something bigger did come along, but when it did, he just wasn't ready for it. And Deontay Wilder that I saw yesterday looks to me to be a shot fighter. A fighter that can't pull the trigger. All the things they like to say about Anthony, that he's gun shy, that he's lost his killer instincts. I've always...
It's a lot of bullshit.
Yesterday's events have left us with a lot more to reflect upon than just the fights. Just the fights themselves, but the narratives built around them, and the fighters as well, that Deontay Wilder...
Well, that stuff they like to say about AJ applies more to Wilder than it does to AJ.
Though as far as the fight, and recapping it, it's a relatively simple matter. Deontay Wilder didn't do anything. He spent 12 rounds circling away from Joseph Parker because he didn't want to engage him mid-range to inside, and from the outside, he didn't have the timing to let the right hand go. Deontay's never had much of a boxing brain. Poor coordination, circling away from the opponent, crossing his feet while he does it.
He never showed much of a jab. I mean, what if I told you that yesterday's fight was not that different from what you usually see in a Wilder fight, except for one thing?
Was only one thing missing. The big right hand. The big right hand that has bailed Deontay Wilder out time and time again in the past. That's all that was missing because it's not unusual for Wilder to go out there and get outboxed by a guy or outmaneuvered by a guy, but usually the right hand can save him. This time it didn't because he didn't have the timing to let it go. The reason he didn't have the timing to let it go was because he sat out for a year. That's his own fault.
Too many of these PBC guys are happy to sit on the couch letting time fly by.
This fight and its outcome has left us with a lot more to reflect upon than just the fight itself. Though as far as the fight itself and recapping it, it's simple. Wilder didn't have the timing to let go of the right hand, and without the right hand, he ain't got nothing else. So Joseph was able to outwork him.
We're gonna be talking more about this in the coming days and weeks. Congratulations to Joseph Parker.
This has turned out to be a very successful, a very productive year for the New Zealand-born champion. And finally, we come to the main event of that same card, the fight between Anthony Joshua and Otto Wallin. Otto, a capable boxer who developed a reputation as a bit of a spoiler due to his performance against Tyson Fury and his more recent performance against former unified cruiserweight champion Murat Gassiev. This is a guy who can box. This is a guy who can fight. Though if it didn't work out against Anthony yesterday, it's because it seems like Otto was trying to stay just outside of striking distance of Anthony Joshua's jab, fencing with his own jab from out of the southpaw stance.
Anthony Joshua's height and length made that difficult to do.
But not just his physical dimensions, his height, his length, his extremities, and what have you, his speed. It doesn't often get said that Anthony's got speed for a man his size. 6'6", what is he, 250 pounds? And he can move, he's athletic, and he does have some speed in those hands. Perhaps not as much speed as, say, Alexander Usyk, but he is quick for a guy his size. So trying to stay on the outside of his jab wasn't a good idea for Otto Wallin because he's got comparatively shorter arms. So Anthony would be able to touch him with his jab before Otto could touch him with his. He lost the battle of the jabs and he was getting caught hard. It didn't take Anthony long to bust that guy's nose all up.
Anthony looked poised, strong, and in control. He looked confident. It's the best I've seen him in years.
What I attribute to two factors, two primarily. It was Anthony's intention this year to box at least 3 times, because the more you do something, the better you become at it. The more you're fighting, the sharper you are.
He fought Jermaine Franklin, he fought a late replacement in Robert Helenius, and he decided to box Otto Wallin in Saudi Arabia, so that by the time he boxes Otto Wallin, he's a lot sharper and more put together than when he boxes Jermaine Franklin earlier this year.
The Anthony Joshua that I saw yesterday, I think would have stopped Jermaine Franklin, but the circumstances were a lot different then, weren't they? In the Jermaine Franklin fight, he was coming off of 2 consecutive losses to Alexander Usyk, whereas in this Otto Wallin fight, he was coming off of 2 consecutive wins. So believe you me, activity matters and activity helps. That's one of the attributing factors, but the other was the corner situation. I said it ahead of the fight. Ben Davison seems like the right fit for Anthony Joshua. Those two.
Ben's got a great boxing brain. Seems like a more fluid pairing than Anthony Joshua and Derek James. That's an odd couple.
Moving forward, based on how well he performed, I don't actually expect to see Derek James back in Anthony Joshua's corner. I expect that it will be Ben Davison we see in his corner moving forward. Build-up of the fight, the usual suspects counted Anthony Joshua out. Bob Arum, Teddy Atlas.
Look, their rationale is because Otto Wallin gave Tyson Fury such a hard time. Great fucking Tyson Fury!
Anthony can't possibly make it past Otto Wallin, not if Otto put the great Tyson Fury through such a hard fight, such a hard night. And I told you, for weeks, for months, I think Anthony can beat this guy. Not only do I think Anthony can beat him, I think he can stop him. Too much is predicated.
For you to believe that, you would have to believe that Tyson Fury is invincible, which he isn't.
It's yet another byproduct of the Fury versus Wilder fights, that Fury, having looked the way that he looked against Deontay Wilder, he's this era's premier heavyweight and the greatest heavyweight of all times, when Wilder is little more than just a one-trick pony, a one-handed fighter. Tyson Fury, for having beaten him, does not make him this era's premier heavyweight. Even if that trilogy was an entertaining one, it's quite a stretch to crown Tyson Fury the best of this era for fighting that guy, the same guy that just lost to Joseph Parker.
So that when an Otto Wallin goes in there and he performs better than anticipated, all of a sudden he's supposed to be too much for Anthony? He's the best thing since sliced bread. Do you see how easily Anthony deconstructed this guy in just 5 rounds?
They didn't want to let him come out for the 6th, where he was able to go 12 with the great Tyson Fury. After slicing his face all up and taking it to him, he couldn't make it to the midway point with Anthony Joshua,
who made it look easy.
And it's not because he was past his prime or he started losing fights. No, the guy was coming off of 6 consecutive victories. You just gotta call a spade a spade. Maybe you thought too much of Otto Wallin because you think too much of Tyson Fury. And maybe you need to take a step back and take a good long look at some of these fights and some of these fighters and reevaluate what you think you know.
Because unfortunately, Deontay Wilder wasn't able to make it past Joseph Parker. He didn't hold up his end of the bargain, but Anthony did, and he made it look easy.
Now Team Joshua seemed to have Filip Hrgovic in their crosshairs in a potential fight for a newly vacated IBF title at some point next year, and I look forward to that. For now, congratulations to him for taking care of business as I said he would.